Hi, I'm Ed Richardson, Keystone's Director of Education, and I'm delighted to be joined by Andy Wimbush, who is one of our professional employed tutors. Andy is an English expert. He holds a BA and a PhD from the University of Cambridge and an MA from King's College London. Since joining us in 2015, he's taught well over 5,000 hours and has a wealth of experience of English teaching and also with the ELAT. So over the next 10 minutes, I'm going to try and tap into Andy's expertise around the ELAT if we can. So Andy, can you start by telling us what is the ELAT?
Sure, thanks, Ed. So the ELAT is the English Literature Admissions Test, and it's a 90-minute exam that's taken by anybody applying to read English literature at the University of Oxford. And historically, it's been the same at the University of Cambridge as well. So this includes at Oxford joint degrees, such as English and another language. But it's important to note that Cambridge may be changing that this year. We haven't actually got confirmation yet. Historically, they have done it. But if students are applying to read English, education, drama, and the arts at Cambridge, then they don't take the ELAT.
Great. So you said it's 90 minutes. Can you give us a bit more of a breakdown of the test format and its structure?
Yeah, so it's basically an exam about looking at unseen texts. So it requires that you write an essay on two unseen texts, comparing and contrasting them by paying attention to language, form, and structure. And the way that it works is that students get given 6 extracts. These could be anywhere from sort of early modern period, so sort of early 1600s, all the way up to the present day. And they'll all be themed around a certain issue. So in the past, they've had extracts related to storms or fathers or art, anything at all, really. And they're going to be from all sorts of different kinds of literature. So yes, poems and novels and plays, the kind of things that students might expect, but also maybe things that they wouldn't expect so much, like letters and diaries, memoirs, even historical documents, political documents, sermons. In any case, there'll always be some literary merit to them. You'll see authors that you'll know, you'll see authors that you don't know. You probably won't see texts that you know. They do try to pick things that are a little bit off the beaten path. And so then the idea is that candidates pick 2 of these texts, whichever ones they like the best, they find the most interesting. And then they write about them, comparing, contrasting them, and looking at the way in which the language, form, and structure creates effects in the reader and what the differences are between the 2 texts.
Great, thanks for that. So I guess you've sort of implied how challenging it might be, but I mean, in general terms, how difficult is the ELAT?
Yeah, so it's not designed to be difficult. You know, they haven't put text on there that are trying to trip you up. And if a candidate finds that a text is not to their liking or they don't understand it, well, they have 5 others to choose from. So it's not an exam where they're trying to trick you, and it's also not an exam where they're trying to test you. So if you don't know who Virginia Woolf is, well, that's no big deal. You know, you might choose to write about her anyway. You don't need to have any knowledge, any background information about the authors or the text. So for students who are familiar with bringing in context, such as in the A-level and the IB, that's not necessary here. You don't need to do that. You're not showing off what you know. It's really a test of skill. And it's trying to test and assess your ability to interpret and reflect on unseen texts in a thoughtful, sensitive, creative, and convincing manner. So it's really testing some skills that actually students have been cultivating for many years. So these are the skills of reading slowly, closely, attentively, really paying attention to the words on the page and the feelings that get generated by certain stylistic choices. It's also testing the skill of writing clearly with purpose and insight and making an argument, crucially. And it's also testing the skill of comparing and also contrasting literary texts. And these are things that most students have been doing for years. So it comes up in the International Baccalaureate Paper 1 for higher and standard level English. It comes up in various parts of all the A-level boards, and it's also there at GCSE. So students aren't being asked to do anything that they haven't done before.
So skills aren't unfamiliar, but potentially some of the texts, possibly some of the authors and kind of their sources, they might be a little bit unusual.
That's right. And again, the aim of that is to try and give everybody something they haven't seen. So, you know, if by some freak accident you go in and you think, oh, I've read this book, you probably shouldn't write about it. You should pick one of the ones that you don't know. Because again, the temptation would be then to talk about all the things that you know outside of the little extract they've given you. And really what they want is how are you responding to something you haven't seen before? The examiners are looking for sensitive, nuanced, thoughtful, elegantly written, clearly argued and well-evidenced essays that shed light on the texts that have been chosen. They're not interested in you bringing in loads of extra information, and there are no bonus points for writing about the most challenging text. Like if one text you find difficult, don't bother. Pick one that you really like.
You've touched on it just there about the marking. How is it scored? How is it marked? And what's a good score?
So this is difficult to say with any precision, but the way that it gets marked is there's two examiners, and they both separately read your work, and they give you a score out of 30. And then those two scores are combined to give you a score out of 60. It seems to us that a score of 50 and above is what you need roughly about to be kind of a good shot for getting an invitation to interview, but that's not a hard and fast rule. So I've had students who are now at Oxford and Cambridge, and they've scored sometimes as low as 45. But then there'll be other parts of their application that helps them to shine. So we're aiming for something like that. But really, when I teach it, I don't really emphasize the scores so much, because it's difficult to say with precision how a text would be scored. And what we're really dealing with is the kind of development and honing of certain skills.
Sure. Okay. You've alluded to the kind of its role in ensuring or giving you the opportunity to be invited to interview. I mean, how important is the ELAT in the kind of the component parts of an application? Your personal statement, your reference, your predicted grades. Obviously, the ELAT is the other component before you get to interview. How important do you think it is?
Yeah, I would say it's really important because unlike, say, the personal statement or the teacher's reference, which it's difficult to quite tell how much influence has been played by, say, the school on that front. The ELAT is really showing the candidates on their own with literature, and so it's a really useful way for examiners and admissions tutors to see what are your skills, what is your potential, irrespective of your background, irrespective of what you know and don't know before. So I would say it's really important. And students who want to apply for a degree at one of these universities should take the time to really get practice and hone their skills in preparation for it.
Let's talk about that, and let's talk about your top tips of preparation. I appreciate we could probably spend hours on these, but if you could distill them down, you've already given lots of information in the last couple of minutes, but what are the top tips? What are your recommendations with regards to preparation?
Yeah, so in terms of what we can do for preparation, obviously there's nothing that you need to know. So, you don't need to start filling in all the holes in your canonical knowledge. Don't bother with that. What you can do is to read widely and curiously. So, if you've tended to read Victorian novels, well, maybe now's the time to branch out into some Renaissance drama or some modernist poetry. Basically, spread your wings a bit so that you can get familiar with different kinds of texts. That's a good way to prepare. And also to read slowly and closely. So, people put a lot of emphasis on how much they've read. The ELAT doesn't really care about that. It's more about how you read, how carefully and creatively you can read. So, to read with a pencil in hand, annotating and doing that kind of thing can be really helpful. In terms of the exam itself, my top tips are really for students to trust their intuitions. So the way that I see it, the art of literary criticism is about basically reverse engineering our responses to a text. So we have a certain response. Maybe we feel awe, or we feel pity, or we feel confusion, or we feel a sense of terror. And then we think, well, how has the writer created that? How has the writer, through his or her choices on the page, managed to do that? So that's what we're looking for. So that requires students really trust their intuitions and tune in to what's unusual about the texts. The ELAT wants you to be a connoisseur of literature. It doesn't want you to put this poem into a box that says, I don't know, Renaissance humanism or something. Actually, we want to know what is unique and exciting to you about this text. The other thing, of course, it really helps to take your time, to plan carefully so that you make an argument and that you write in a way that's clear. So one of the things that sometimes students are surprised to find is that the ELAT doesn't really care that much about how much jargon you know. So sometimes at A-level and IB, there's a lot of emphasis placed on technical terms. The ELAT's not so interested in that. Yeah, they might be helpful, but they're not a substitute for clear analysis. And if you spot something that you don't know the term for, great, talk about it. Tell us what the effect is, what the choice is going on here. write clearly in language that is easy to understand and elegant. One way to test this is to read your work aloud after you've written an essay. Does it sound fluid? Does it sound clear? Is it obvious to the reader what you're trying to argue? That's what we want to do. We want to communicate our experience of reading a text with an author, with a reader. So yeah, we take our experience of reading the text and try and share that with somebody else. I think it's easy for students to forget that examiners are other human beings they're trying to communicate with.
Just final question, how far in advance, the ELAT's often sat, historically it's sat at the end of October, beginning of November. We're not sure with Cambridge whether this now might become an at-interview assessment, so it might be sat in December. But when should students be looking to broaden their reading? I appreciate this is perhaps something they should be doing anyway along the way, but how far in advance would you recommend preparing?
Yeah, so I mean, broadening your reading definitely should be, if you're in year 12 now, at sort of springtime when we're recording this is a great time to start doing this after you finish your summer exams. Yeah, and then to continue that over the summer. In terms of actual preparation to the ELAT, I'm always a little wary of students beginning too soon. We don't want to have done so much practice that we're kind of writing by rote or in a really mechanical or fixed way. It's meant to be creative. It's meant to be a sense of genuine, authentic response that you're producing. So I usually recommend that students want to start preparing, want to start doing practice essays, that they start that towards the end of the summer, and then really kind of start doing it regularly in September and October and then on to the exam. Again, the ELAT's not testing anything that they haven't done before, but it can be really useful to do some past papers just to hone that skill, to really develop that skill, to find your own critical voice as well. But again, we don't want to do that too far in advance so that we sort of peak too early or we burn out. September and October is usually early enough, but for some people, they may want to begin a little earlier in the summer.
Great. Thank you so much, Andy. You've written an excellent blog on the ELAT, which gives loads and loads of preparation tips and answers a lot of the questions that people frequently have around the ELAT that people can find on the Keystone website. And of course, we have great tutors such as yourself who can help students prepare for the ELAT. So thanks very much for your time. Yeah, have a good rest of the day.
Thanks, Ed. It's been a pleasure.